Hey everyone, my name is Kim. In this video, I'm going to show you the steps necessary to change the lower gears on your X-Range Propel. Important note for this replacement. This task includes a 24-hour Loctite cure time prior to use on the water. Let's begin by discussing the parts, tools, and supplies needed for this task. First, you will need to get a lower gear replacement kit. You can find this kit on the Native Watercraft website. The kit includes a lower fairing gear and a lower cartridge gear. The tools and supplies needed to replace the lower gears include a variable pin spanner wrench with 6mm pins, 4mm hex key, 3mm hex key, mineral oil, denatured alcohol, cotton swabs, finish line premium grease, medium Loctite, a 243, and a clean rag and toothbrush. We begin by changing the lower cartridge gear. Start by removing the propeller using a 4mm hex key to loosen the propeller screw. Remove the propeller and screw and set them to the side. Wipe any grease or debris off the lower cartridge surface with a clean rag. Next, remove the lower cartridge using the 6mm spanner wrench. Slowly rock a crank arm forward and backwards to help gently unmesh gears while you are unscrewing the cartridge from the lower cast. Then, reattach the propeller to the lower cartridge. This is done by lining the recesses on the bottom of the propeller to the drive pin and pressing down. There is no need to screw it down. Using a 3mm hex key, remove the transmission screw on the gear end of the lower cartridge. Clean and remove old Loctite from the screw with a rag and denatured alcohol, then set it aside. Now we remove the gear and bearing combination from the propeller spindle. Slide the two bearings off the old gear, wipe them down, and set them to the side. Clean and remove the old Loctite from the internal threads of the propeller spindle using a cotton swab and denatured alcohol. Then, wipe any grease off of the exterior splines of the propeller spindle. Now it is time to install the new gear onto the lower cartridge. Start by wiping the excess oil off the new gear. Slide the two bearings onto this gear and install the new gear bearing combo onto the propeller spindle. Drop one drop of Loctite onto the transmission screw and screw to 0 or until it stops. To set the tension, unscrew the transmission screw slightly. Test the back and forth play of the spindle within the cartridge. Then test the tension by turning the propeller. Make slight adjustments on the screw until you have reached the desired amount of tension. The goal is to get the least tension or easier spin without any back and forth play of the spindle within the cartridge. The adjustment unscrewing is slight and varies with each cartridge. Now on to the removal and the replacement of the lower fairing gear. Detach the lower cast by removing the 4 bolts holding it to the middle cast. You will use the 4mm hex key to remove the bolts. Gently remove the lower cast. Check the lower fairing O-ring to make sure there are no nicks or cuts. I use a bit of mineral oil and slide my fingers around the O-ring. Replace if damaged once the new gear has been installed. I invert the unit so I can use the crank arms to brace while I remove the gear. Place the 3mm hex key firmly into the transmission screw holding the lower fairing gear. Remove the screw and clean the threads with a rag and denatured alcohol. Set the screw to the side. Now remove the existing gear. Wipe any grease away from the bottom of the fairing. Then clean the internal threads on the transmission rod with a cotton swab soaked with denatured alcohol. Wipe the excess oil off the new gear and install onto the transmission rod. Put a drop of medium Loctite on the transmission screw and screw to 0. Allow the Loctite on the lower fairing and lower cartridge screws to set overnight. After the Loctite has cured, you can prepare your parts for reassembly. Start by oiling the O-rings on the lower fairing and lower cartridge. I use a cotton swab dipped in oil. Be sure to cover the O-rings generously. If you had to replace the lower fairing O-ring, now is the time to install the replacement onto the lower fairing O-ring recess. Be careful not to nick the O-ring with the lower fairing gear. Smear oil on the edge of the mating hole on the lower cast. Grease both the lower cartridge gear and the lower fairing gear with finish line premium grease. Now we are ready for reassembly. Install the lower cast by carefully placing it onto the lower end of the fairing. Pause for a moment to feel the lower cast resting on the O-ring. Ensure that the lower cast is sitting level with the fairing. Then, with even pressure on all sides, push until the lower cast snaps onto the fairing, taking special care not to damage or roll the O-ring. Reinstall 4 bolts that hold the lower shell to the fairing. Hand tighten screws to ensure good fit. Install the lower cartridge onto the unit by first placing the cartridge into the lower cast. Turn the cartridge by hand while using your other hand to gently rock the crank arm until you feel the gears meet. Use the crank arm to back off slightly to center the gears and continue to screw the cartridge in until it stops. Tighten with a 6mm spanner wrench. Check to see if you have meshed the gears correctly by gently spinning one of the crank arms. If the gears feel bound, uninstall the lower cartridge and try again. We finish up with reinstalling the propeller. Line up the drive pin for mating with the propeller. The underside of the propeller has a slot designed to seat the drive pin for a more secure fit. Match the pin with the slot and slide the propeller over the propeller shaft. The propeller should snap right onto the drive pin and lower cartridge. Tighten the prop screw with a 4mm hex key. Now your X-Range Propel is ready to hit the water and help you catch all those fish. One final note, check out our troubleshooting video at the end of this playlist. It addresses common problems you may encounter along with their solutions. As always, if you have additional questions, contact your local dealer. Thanks for watching.